Council. Joining me now is Dai Lee, Independent MP for Fowler, and journalist Virginia Tapscott. I'll start with you, Dai. I mean, it seems pretty simple. We have more and more subsidies coming on. The subsidy increased in the federal budget again in July. You jack up the subsidy, it seems to be like a red rag to a bull for these childcare centres. Well, if the government's going to give us more money, we simply jack up the price of the childcare. It cancels out the extra government subsidy, and around we go on the merry-go-round. And you pay for it, I pay for it as taxpayers, and ultimately mums and dads end up paying more.
Look, thanks, Caleb. Absolutely. Look, when the policy in terms of to make cheaper childcare for families, I did raise the issue with the government of, back then that the issue is around the supply. As we know, there's workforce shortages across the country in every sector, and I really raised a concern that by having this policy to make cheaper childcare and also the increased wage for our early childhood educators, and who deserve that, by the way. The problem is that we have not looked at supply and demand at the same time. The government's policy was to address the demand side and not addressing the supply side, which is causing a problem. We're in a vicious cycle at the moment. As you mentioned just earlier, just listening to you talking to Ross Greenwood there, the cost of living is just skyrocketed. And therefore, childcare centres, and we had a forum in the community in Fowler, we had a forum with the childcare providers as well as the families who are using childcare to understand their needs and the cost of running a childcare centre. Obviously, the cost has gone up as well in terms of electricity bills, increased salary, increased costs in food, increased costs in, the needs of the childcare centre. At the end of the day, families will have to pay. It's the end consumers who will have to pay for this. So I think there is an issue here, and obviously COVID has accelerated the whole costs in everything, in increasing costs in everything, that we need to really address the cost of supply, first of all, and then how do we address? Because I think that according to the report last year, the labour costs of running a childcare centre account for 69% of the cost of a childcare centre. Labour costs. Yeah. So there's a lot of cost there, and of course the centre as well. The land has gone up. It's 15% of the cost of the childcare centre.
Of course. I mean, an Australian couple now, on average wages with 2 kids, is spending about 16% of their net income on childcare costs, and you compare that to the OECD average, which is 9%. So, you're paying about 80% more in Australia than you are to comparable countries. And I know you've written about this before, Virginia, and I've written about it as well. The idea, and I know the government doesn't like it because it would involve taking people out of the workforce, but we're already spending obscene amounts of money on childcare subsidies. If we've got this pot of money sitting there, basically to look after kids, why don't we make that available to parents who also want to stay at home and look after their kids? I mean, if 69% of the cost of childcare is wages, it's labour, you can eliminate that by giving parents money to stay at home with their kids. I know it wouldn't be great for the economy. We want all this eternal economic growth. But Virginia, I think in many cases, a lot of parents, and certainly a lot of kids, would prefer that.
Yeah, there's only so much money you can spend on improving the quality of childcare and bringing the costs down for families before you have to look into the cost effectiveness of using parents as part of the model of care for our youngest and most vulnerable citizens. Our childcare prices are exorbitant compared to other countries because our childcare system is largely based on a for-profit model. We outsourced childcare to the free market in the early days when we were building our childcare sector, and that also affects quality. So if you're looking at the best quality care and possibly a more cost-effective model of care, we really need to start looking at how the measures like extended parental leave and parental allowances weigh up against continuing to plough money into essentially an industry that's largely privately backed.
And this is the thing, Di, right? So, I mean, the Education Minister, Jason Clare, is already threatening to name and shame childcare operators that he says are gouging parents. But, I mean, what is the answer to nationalise the system? I know some councils run childcare centres, but are we talking about here to try and deal with this, the government essentially taking over the childcare system and administering it itself, because the government wants the parents to go to work so they can help power the economy, etc. And a lot of parents feel like both parents have to go to work in order to deal with the current cost of living, but then they're paying hand over fist to send their kids to childcare so they can do it, so they don't actually end up all that much further in front.
I don't know if I would want the government to look after my child. I don't think that the government would have the skill set to provide care for children. Look, I think that in my understanding from reading, the report that was released, having scanned a reading of it, the minister is talking regarding a few very big, large childcare centres that are on the stock exchange that's publicly listed, and I think that's he's referring to those big conglomerates of childcare providers. But I think what I'm talking to about are the small business, the family run or council run childcare centres that really are bearing a lot of the cost. And look, I think that parents who wants to go to work should be able to, find a good childcare to place their child. Because at the end of the day, these early childhood providers are shaping our children. And of course, parents who choose to stay at home, then they choose to stay at home to look after their kids. I was a working mum, and I had to look for very good childcare for my son. He's now in his 20s. But it is a challenge to find a good childcare. In my community in Fowler, a very multicultural community, we do have that extended family networks that provide that childcare, that step in when the childcare centres are over, kind of stock too many. There are too many kids, and there's a huge waiting list.
And it's great. I mean, it's great if you've got that behind you, but I suppose a lot of people don't. And just very quickly, Virginia, we've only got 30 seconds here, but it feels to me like we've almost demonised the idea of a stay-at-home parent, particularly a stay-at-home mum or a woman not in the workforce. How dare we?
Yeah, there's a lot of stigma attached to that, which I have experienced, and I, for a long time, didn't identify as a stay-at-home parent because I really felt that stigma. But I think it's time that we really try and break down the stereotype, because the stay-at-home parents are doing a power of work, and we deserve support. And the unpaid work that props up our whole market economy needs resourcing, and it needs resourcing right now.
To right, Di Lee, Virginia Tapscott, thank you for joining me tonight.